So I wanted to welcome everybody who's joining us. Thank you for taking the time to hop in to kind of check out this next installment of the SU Teaches SU presentations. Today we're going to have Dr. Kappus presenting. He's going to go over how students can write emails professionally, basically writing an email like a pro. Dr. Kappus has been a faculty member here at Southwest University for just over 3 years now. He teaches our biology and geology courses, and his training is actually in geology, where he's made some significant discoveries in the El Paso region. Um, as part of that, he's also part of our SU outreach, where he'll go and he'll give field trips. He'll do presentations out in the mountains, kind of showing off fossils, showing off significant geological landmarks within the area, which El Paso as a region is rich in those. So if you ever have a chance to visit some of those, reach out to, if you're interested in some of those, reach out to Dr. Kappus and he can get you some of that information. He's also the guy you might see walking around picking up rocks and putting them in his pocket if they seem like they're interesting enough rocks for him. He does have 3 cats that he loves like his own children. So, not only rocks, but he enjoys his feline friends. But I do want to thank Dr. Kappus for taking the time to put this presentation together. This is something that students struggle with and maybe don't realize they struggle with, writing emails in a professional manner. But I'll let Dr. Kappus take over and present how to write an email like a pro. So, Dr. Kappus.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ramos. That was a great introduction. I think that's my best introduction ever. So I'm going to take a short amount of time to go through a bunch of principles that can help you to write an email like a pro. So let me get started. First, here's an outline of my talk. First, I'm going to talk about what kind of email account you should use. Then I'm going to talk about the addressee, the person you're writing to, and the subject line. Then I'll get into the greeting, the text and purpose of the email, the meat of the email, and then the goodbye part of the email, and finally proofreading, which of course is the most important part of this talk. Look carefully, proofread all my slides, and see if you can find any mistakes. First, your email account. You should use your work email or an email specifically set up for work or for school in this case. You can see my Southwest University email address there. And then if your institution, if your job, if your school doesn't provide you with an email, then I strongly recommend that you make an email address specifically for that job. So let's say that SU did not give me an email address, then below is an example of an email address that I would make for this job. Of course, SU is wonderful enough to provide us all with emails. Now, setting up an email account, you have to pay attention to 3 things. First is your username, which you can see down there, Jane Smith or whatever. Next is the display name, and if you don't set this up, then you need to go into the profile of your email account and make sure to set that up. And last is the domain, and of course for us at SU, it's southwestuniversity.edu. The display name is important. You don't just want to put anything here. Let me put something fun. So Jane doesn't want to put your girl Jane for her display name because this shows up when people get emails from Jane. So this is an important detail, not just the actual email address itself. Like I said, if you're given the option, always use an email account that's set up by your institution. And so you can see my institutional email address there, and then I've crossed out the other one that I did not make for Hotmail. Below are some examples of email providers, and of course I recommend Outlook if you're going to create a new email address specifically for a job or for schooling, something like that. Of course, you don't have to worry about that because we all have SU emails. And an important part that's not really written on this slide is when you email your instructors, you should always use your SU email address to make sure that your email doesn't get sent to junk or something like that. Here are some, this was my favorite part of preparing this presentation, by the way. Here are some email addresses that were actually used by people on resumes. I actually deleted some of the more X-rated ones, most of the X-rated ones, and so I'm going to read them just because it'll sound funny for me to read them. First is Drunk Girl 467. Think about how these portray you if you were to use one of these email addresses. Fat Booty Cutie 69, Too Hot for Words, Kilo of Coke 123, Beastly Johnson, and Ho for Show. So these are some examples of email addresses that you would definitely want to avoid. Also, the providers, you can see they just put xxxx.com. When I give this presentation in my classes, I sarcastically tell my students not to use their Pornhub email address, but I didn't feel it was very professional to put that as a domain in this presentation. And here's a meme I found. I'll let you read that. Nothing says regret like the email address you made as a kid. Next is the addressee, who you're sending the email to. And you can see below, in the example, this is my email for SU, and I'm sending Dr. Ramos an email, and then my cat, one of my 3 cats, walked across the keyboard and hit JER, and it's about to include the dean of the school, or is he the vice president now? The vice president of the school, Mr. Burciaga. So you want to make sure that you don't accidentally include or CC the wrong person in your email. And this goes along with the reply all option. If your professor emails an entire class, you want to be careful not to hit reply all and send every single student your thank yous. Next is the subject line, and my advice about the subject line is to use a short, descriptive subject line with important keywords. And so you can see down there I've included stuff as my subject line. So if Dr. Ramos needs to go back and check through his email for the message from me about such and such, stuff is not very descriptive, and when he's searching through emails, he's going to have to open this email and see exactly what stuff I was talking about. Also, hopefully you're looking at this image thinking critically, and you said, hey, wait a minute, Dr. Kappus, it looks like you've actually included the president of SU in your email to Dr. Ramos. So this goes back to my last slide about making sure that you pay attention who you address your emails to. I certainly do not want to be including Mr. Ariola in my emails about stuff to Dr. Ramos. Here's a good example of a subject line circled in red. You can see that I've got the class name that I'm referring to, and let's say I'm emailing Dr. Ramos, who's my boss, of course. Let's say I'm emailing Dr. Ramos about a specific assignment, and so I include that in the subject line. Make sure your subject line is not the text of your email. Don't copy 2 paragraphs into the subject line. Make it short and descriptive. The next part of the email is the greeting, again circled in red. Make sure you address the recipient respectfully and properly spell their name. So did I spell Dr. Ramos's name correctly? Yes, I did. And my greeting is kind of a friendly opening to the email. In this case, I hope you are safe and well. This is definitely an appropriate greeting during the pandemic. more about correctly spelling their name. This is my second favorite part of this presentation. So my professional title is Dr. Kappus. I have a PhD, and I introduce myself to my students as Dr. Kappus. And here's a list of some of the things that I've been called in emails from students. Dr. Campus, DD Kappus, all lowercase, Mr. Kappus or Meester Kappus, Dr. Kappus, Dr. Kappus. That was from my boss, actually. Thanks, boss. Mrs. Kappus, one of my favorite ones. Dr. Krappus, another one of my favorite ones. And finally, my favorite, Dr. Krampus. Now, Dr. Krampus might not mean anything to you unless you know a little bit about the history of Yule and Christmas. Krampus is actually the Christmas devil, the one who would punish and torture and scare children on the naughty list. Definitely my favorite misspelling of my name. Next, the body, the text of the email. And I have several pieces of advice about this. First, each paragraph in the email should be about only one topic. Separate these topics into different paragraphs. So if I need to email Dr. Ramos and talk about 5 things, then as you can see on this page, I have 5 separate paragraphs. So insert a line between paragraphs. Next, don't overuse things like italics or bold. Use them sparingly. And in this sentence, you can see I've completely overused both. Next, avoid writing in all capital letters. It reads like you're yelling. Next, don't overuse exclamation points like I did in that line. And finally, don't ramble. Proofread for conciseness and clarity. And I'm not even going to read the rest because that's just a bunch of rambling, right? So I'm already bored with this if you start to ramble, blah, 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 whatever. So to summarize, separate paragraphs for each topic. Don't overuse bold and italics. Avoid writing in all capital letters. Don't overuse exclamation points, and don't ramble. Next is the farewell or the goodbye and the email signature. Here you can see my farewell to Dr. Ramos. There are many ways to say farewell. You can Google this. Some examples are hope this helps, thanks a bunch, thanks a lot, have a great day, thank you for your time, some way to say goodbye. And then, of course, I sign my name. At the bottom here, this image you can see is my email signature. This is the email signature that Southwest University provided for me. That way all instructors have a uniform email signature, but you can see the important elements of an email signature. So if your boss doesn't provide you with one, then these are the important elements. First is your affiliation, which is on the left there, the logo. Next is your name and qualifications, in my case, PhD. Next is your title. In this case, I'm faculty at SU, and I'm also a community liaison. And then other information is relevant phone numbers, a fax number, and a website address, and maybe even the address of where I work. So this is a complete and professional email signature. Here's an example of how not to do it. So if you're not provided with an email signature and you don't know how to write a farewell, this is how you would do it. So here's my email to Dr. Ramos. I'm talking about this student issue. So that's the subject line up there. And I'm saying, hey, this is a very serious issue. I hope it can be resolved quickly. And then look at the way that I say farewell. Hopefully you actually make the time to deal with this. So that's not respectful. I don't want to talk to my instructors or my students or my boss in this way. Hopefully, I've never spoken to you like this, Dr. Ramos. Then I sign my name, and then I've inserted my own signature at the bottom. If you can't handle me at my worst, you can't possibly deserve me at my best. So maybe I made this email signature when my girlfriend was breaking up with me or something, when I made the email account when I was 15 years old or something like that. So make sure that you have a professional signature or just don't make one at all. So there's a great example of an unprofessional signature. Next is proofreading. You need to go back and check each element of the email that I just described for spelling and clarity. First, check the name of the addressee, the person that you're writing to. Next, check the CC and BCC lines for anyone you might have accidentally included in the email. CC stands for carbon copy, and BCC stands for blind carbon copy. And of course, names or email addresses in the BCC line do not show up to the addressee. Next, you check the subject line. Next, you check the greeting. Next, you check all of your text and your main points, proofreading carefully for spelling and grammar. And lastly, check your farewell and your signature if you have it. Hopefully you found one mistake on this slide as you were proofreading it. Once you've proofread, then you click send, not until you've proofread. That's it. That's all I've got. I'd like to open up the forum for any questions that you all might have or comments. Maybe one of my colleagues is in here and saw a big thing that I missed. So any questions, anybody?
So we do have a lot of the participants on mute. So if you do have a question, please click the raise hand option and we'll kind of unmute you and have you ask the question. But I do have two questions for you, Dr. Kappus. So you kind of went through, proofread your email and sent it all out. What do you recommend as an appropriate time frame to follow up on an email if you haven't gotten a response yet?
Oh, that's a good one. So I one thing that I've noticed is that if I respond to my students immediately, even at 11 p.m. at night or midnight, they really appreciate that. And so the best answer is as soon as possible. These days we have email on our phones, most of us anyway, and so it's real easy to shoot back a response. But at the maximum, I would say within 24 hours.
All right, so if somebody doesn't get a response within 24 hours, they should send just a polite reminder email to follow up, or what do you suggest they do in that instance?
So I have missed student emails before during times when I'm getting bunches of emails at a time, or maybe I'm out on a field trip and I see the email, but then I forget about it. I do suggest after 24 hours or maybe 36 hours, sending a polite reminder, hey, did you get my message? Did you receive my message? The only exception to that is if I email someone over the weekend, then I kind of cut them a little slack and wait until Monday before I follow up with a question like, hey, did you receive my email on Saturday?
All right, and based off of your experience receiving emails from your students, what would you say is the most common mistake that students make when writing you an email?
Um, I think the most common mistake is no context in the text. So I'll get emails with no subject line and no greeting, no sign off, no farewell, no signature. literally one sentence that says, "Did you get my assignment?" And so, of course, immediately I have to email them back. I'm sorry, which assignment are you referring to, and which class are you in, by the way? So, lack of context, lack of important information.
And then aside from the context, what do you think would be the most important aspect for students to focus on when sending the emails? I know you kind of went over, the 4 or 5 things for them to check, but which would you say is the most important?
I'm pretty forgiving if a student CCs the dean of the school. I'm pretty forgiving if the student misspells my name. Usually that just makes me laugh. I'm pretty forgiving if they don't sign their name at the end or they include a weird signature. The only thing that really makes it difficult for me is a lack of sufficient information in the text. When they email and I really have no idea which assignment or activity or class they're emailing about.
All right. Did anybody else have any questions for Dr. Kappus? Dr. Gutierrez?
Yes, I have a question. My issue with emails is how do you address females, coworkers, or students when you're not sure about the marital status? And is it okay to put their dear, so and so?
This is a struggle for me too. I really struggle with it, and different jobs that I've had have different protocols. The first thing I do is before I try to email them back, I carefully look at the way that they've signed their email. And so Ms. Lazarin, for example, I don't know if Ms. Lazarin is married. If she signs her email with Dr. Lazarin or Ms. Lazarin or Miss Lazarin, then I address them exactly. Another way is to just use the first name. If you're nervous that you'll offend them, just use their first name. Also, I will search through my other emails looking for their name. So I will click up in the search bar and type in Lazarin, for example, and I'll look for how other people have addressed her. If I see that everyone is putting MZ, Ms. Lazarin, then I'll copy that. If I see that everyone else has put Miss Lazarin, then I'll put that. When in doubt, though, I don't think it hurt if you're worried, if this is your boss, like Ms. Lazarin is in my case, I don't think it's offensive to shoot them a message and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I don't know how you would like me to address you," or give them a quick call and say, "Hey, I was about to send you an email, but I don't really know how to address you." No one's going to be offended if you take the time to actually care how they should be addressed. So, in the end, when in doubt, for female coworkers, I just put MS period, Miss.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
It helped.
Do we have any other questions? Mr. Pablo Gomez, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, my question was like on the subject line, if you put the class you're taking, is that enough, or do you also want to include it in the context of the body, or is it okay just to put it in the subject line?
I think it's sufficient to put it in the subject line. When I get emails from students and they've included the class name in the subject line, the first thing I do is open up SU Learning and open up that class and find their name. Unless, of course, it's a coworker, then I don't do that. But if it's a student, that's emailing me, then the first thing I do before I even read the email is open up SU Learning and get in that class, find their name, and take a look at them, and then read their email. And I can then confer with or refer to SU Learning based on whatever they're talking about. So I think the subject line is sufficient. And also, I think a little bit more professional, a little bit more um, well prepared or well delivered.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And if I can add to that, I would also suggest not only putting the class, but the time that the class is at. So for example, Dr. Kappus could potentially have 3 Bio 101 classes, an 8 o'clock, a 10 o'clock, and a 12 o'clock. So if you also put the time, that lets him, instead of having to go check 3 classes, he'll know exactly which class you're referring to.
Yes, sir. That's what I was going to ask about that too, because I know there's AM, PM classes and not just one class. So I was, is it okay as well? Like Dr. Ramos said, include it in the subject line.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thanks, Dr. Ramos. That's terrific.
All right, so if there's no questions, I did want to thank Dr. Kappus for taking his time and preparing this presentation for everybody. Let's see. If you have any questions, you can email Dr. Kappus, reach out to your other faculty, reach out to myself or your program directors regarding emails or whatever it might be. I did want to mention that we will have another SU Teaches SU talk on February 24th at 2 p.m. For this talk, we're going to have Mr. Castillo, who's one of our math and science instructors, and he's going to go over on how to create a YouTube channel and upload videos onto that YouTube channel. So that's something that will be pretty cool to be able to do if you have aspirations of becoming a famous YouTuber. But thank you everybody for joining us. Dr. Kappus, do you want to just share your contact information one more time real quick before we close off?
I do. Let me. Well, I can just say it. It's EKAPPUS@southwestuniversity.edu. And if any of you would like a copy of this presentation, the file's only 2 megabytes, so I could easily email that to you if you would like your own copy of the PowerPoint.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kappus. Thank you, everybody who joined us, and thank you for the questions. But hopefully it was informative, and we will be sharing this recording out to everybody, hopefully sometime soon. But thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next SU Teaches SU presentation.
Thank you. Thank you all for showing up.